When we speak today of election interference, we speak of virtually any information we don't like, even if true or justifiable. And any information we don't like must be silenced or hidden, for its presence makes it more likely that someone will hear that information or be swayed by it, thereby influencing the vote. The irony here is that by this reasoning, if we do not interfere with free speech, by declaring and censoring what we don't like as disinformation or fake news, then we are interfering with the election. In other words, it is impossible not to interfere with an election. This is guaranteed all the way down to the quantum level when you think about it, with the principle being that when you observe a system, you perturb that system. Observation is a form of interaction, and that scales up to the macroscopic, everyday world where seeing, hearing, or acknowledging something adds information to your mental database on the state of things. Not necessarily even things you agree with, but even the opinions of others and how to perhaps parse and navigate those opinions, whether to coexist peacefully, engage in spirited, intellectual discourse and debate, or terrorize, silence, and escalate conflicts with what one perceives to be the enemy. So any discussion with anyone who disagrees with you could therefore be considered election interference, because you might find common ground and reach new perspectives on both sides which could change people's minds. And changing people's minds could change their votes, which again interferes with the election, quote unquote. Following this line of argument, you should not discuss anything with anyone you disagree with, because after all, you might learn something, and you don't need to learn anything beyond what you already believe, because you can always choose to believe that you're already absolutely correct about everything, like a free particle a billion light years away in space from anything else, which will exist in its own echo chamber, never receiving any signals or influences from anything else. And it may seem like a cult-like mindset, but we can see it play out in the modern world of the information age, or perhaps the disinformation age, as some would like to call it. For example, former FBI Director James Comey disclosed the reopening of a probe of then-Democrat presidential nominee Hillary Clinton's emails in 2016. Many of her supporters considered this to be election interference, given that it was in the final stages of the election campaign. And you can still see people today claim that Republican nominee Donald Trump only won the election because of Comey's interference. Well, this line of reasoning implicitly admits that news stories and the framing and timing of news stories can affect people's attitudes toward an election, thereby affecting the electoral outcome. And while such a large significance may have been placed and still be placed on that FBI letter to Congress, there are thousands of news stories reported by media outlets in any presidential election, even in the final stages of an election, so there might as well be thousands of opportunities to interfere. The Access Hollywood NBC tape of Trump stating in 2005, off the record, that he could get away with grabbing women because they let him do it, for instance, was another story presented as a scandal which was obviously an attempt to paint Trump as a villain. And considering it was not part of his platform, and he was not speaking in any public capacity, but rather being recorded unknowingly, it was rather telling that the network waited 11 years to publicize the tape in the last stages of the election, so as to bring it up as a debate question. Of course, supporters of Hillary Clinton would never consider such a video as election interference, because they believed it to be the correct information about Trump that aligned with their opinions on his character flaws. Of course, it did not appear to work, as people already knew of Trump as the celebrity playboy who had an affair with a stripper. Yet he appeared immune to being affected by these supposed character flaws, perhaps because he didn't pretend to be some squeaky clean character that many phony politicians like to portray themselves as. He just ranted and raved, admittedly, like a regular guy, for better or for worse, and that appealed to and continues to appeal to many people. However, the outcry over election interference, especially when it comes to the Russian interference narrative about the 2016 American presidential election, rings sort of hollow, given that Russian operatives reportedly bought a couple $100,000 worth of Facebook ads. Well, that is 1,000 times smaller in magnitude than the level of support offered by people like Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg for the Democrat candidate. Democrat supporters don't seem to mind much when many billionaires are on their side. But to have one guy like Tesla and SpaceX founder Elon Musk on Trump's side seems to lend a data point of credence toward the idea that Trump is for the elites. A single platform like X allowing him back on is generating a lot of election interference outcries on various platforms that want him silenced, even in places like the European Union. They seem to care a great deal about stifling free speech in America, and it is strange. Regardless, it is truly impossible to have totally interference-free elections, as that would involve not interacting with any other people at any time or sharing any news at all. Any act or sharing information is an exchange which incrementally changes the probabilities of one candidate winning versus another in ways which cannot be individually measured. There is a lot of noise involved, and with fewer people attaching as much trust or value to public institutions as in previous eras, to include organized religion as well, with church attendance and professed belief going down drastically so far this century, more people attach their identities to their political parties than before, especially in such a divided environment. This makes it so that everything is basically political, or at least we can state that something is certainly political if someone is proclaiming that it is not political or that we shouldn't be politicizing it. Ironically, the claim that something is not a political issue is a major evidence that it is actually a completely political issue, since politics is the art of control. And to state something as uncontroversial or settled science, for example, is a way to push one's beliefs as constituting objective reality, inarguable, and to therefore demand unopposed control over a situation. After all, it's not political, quote unquote. Framing a narrative in which a statement is not controversial despite oppositional speech to such a statement existing, that is controversy, is a way to disregard the opinion of others. After all, what is or is not political? Is something only political when there's an approximately 50-50 division within a society over such an issue? Well, the window of discussion and belief shifts over time, so it is hard to draw the line there. What was once considered political is no longer political, and vice versa. So we have to realize that how something is framed and portrayed is itself a function of modern politics, the Overton window, and the notion of what is or isn't considered allowed to be discussed. And in a society that believes in free speech, all topics should be allowed to be discussed, shared, and debated so long as it is done so in a manner that adheres to civil discourse, rather than open threats on people's physical safety. So go ahead and interfere with the election, hopefully in honest ways, by getting informed, discussing your viewpoints, and voting. It is your civic duty.